Punxsutawney Phil's executioner. I just drove down to Walgreens after getting home from work this morning. Coming up to the store, I could see something in the street just before the drive. It was right on the line between lanes. Switching lanes, I avoided hitting it and was slowed down enough as I passed to see that it was a woodchuck, a groundhog, a whistle pig, lying in a small puddle of arterial blood. I could see it breathing. I parked at Walgreens, walked back out of the lot, and up the sidewalk a bit to stand and look at it. It was still breathing. The blood had come out of its ear and poured down the side of its face. I didn't see any more coming out. The 9:15 traffic was clods or rush hour stragglers, the slag that was running late. They steered clear of it, passing by at 40 miles an hour. I was sure he was gonna die there, maybe any second. Looking at him lying there, breathing heavy, I felt awful. This poor guy, all run down, and still they kept coming. Dying isn't the worst part of it. That he was dying and petrified, that no one would leave him alone, that no one would allow him peace. I'd looked for a pair of gloves in my trunk before walking back there and found none. Before standing there looking at him, I'd considered ending it by crushing his brains out with my heel, but he looked pretty good. I reckoned he wouldn't be able to scratch or bite if I got him by the armpits from behind. And as long as he hadn't been screwing my ex-girlfriend, I wouldn't need to worry about getting his blood on me. There was a break in traffic coming, which I walked quietly out into. Breathing heavy with his eyes closed, I wasn't sure what he would do when I picked him up. He let me carry him to the traffic passing just as I stepped off the street. I must have looked like Punxsutawney Phil's executioner. Getting closer to the creek bed, he wiggled a bit. I looked for a place in the undergrowth where the sun wouldn't come through the trees and fry his brain. I found it and set him down. I pet him, and it seemed his breathing slowed. I'd done what I could and walked into the store, hoping the counter girl wouldn't ask me how I was doing. I felt pathetic. I put my beer and chocolate milk on the counter, and she asked me how my day was going. I tried to lie and said, "Good," but I felt my face wasn't supporting it. I looked at her and said, "That's not true. I'm sad." I told her the story, and at the end of it, I was carrying the beer and the milk to the exit. That's when she said, "Sir, that's going to be $22.80. It occurred to me that I could get out of the store with a beer at a huge discount if I could just perfect the timing. I gotta start running again. I put my stuff in the trunk and walked back over to check on the woodchuck. Petting him before, I couldn't feel any broken bones and didn't notice any new blood coming out of its ear. Maybe it just looked worse because it was fresh. Coming around the wall of the creek bed, I saw a dirty, grizzled old man gripping the woodchuck's fur, trousers around his ankles, and fucking it hard. I'd tell you about how I dragged the guy out of the sunshine into the shadow of his own sick mind, beating the living fuck out of him with a tree branch and then using it to take the abuse to another level. But none of that is true. I just made the sexual encounter part up. I wouldn't want to debilitate the truth by throwing in a lie. It's just that you can't have a story about tragedy, violence, and death without a good sex scene. So I came around that wall and had a hard time seeing the woodchuck, even though he was right there in the shade where I'd left him. His eye open, regular breathing. He looked at me walking up, and I pet him 3 times. He made a "oh, oh, oh" sound and walked off a few quick steps and stopped. So I didn't follow. But then I wondered if his back leg had walked or just dragged. I reached out and gave that foot a light little pinch. He tugged it away and walked like a healthy citizen into the hobo jungle woodland. I'm thinking his brain has got to be rattled pretty hard. But if it was still good enough to walk him off, there's a decent probability that it's still good enough to remind him to feed. If that's the case, maybe he'll be better off than he was. Maybe he can live on, forgetting the terrible things all the other animals have done to him. The humans, worst of all. So I ask, how much wood could a woodchuck chuck if he's been run down like a dog? Oh, Jefferson Morley, you just can't stay away from the animals, can you? That is another Jefferson Morley story that I thought, you know what? Groundhog Day. Candlemas. That's the Sumerian holiday. I'd mentioned it before, but I didn't give you the name. It's Candlemas, just like Walpurgisnacht, Wolf's Night in April 30th. February 2nd, Candlemas in Sumerian times. You know, they got all these holidays, and we still hold on to them. I've talked about it. But Walpurgisnacht, April 30th, is a great one because it's Wolf's Night. They've got all these things. That's when Hitler killed himself, April 30th. A cult. But I get distracted. The thing is, here's this story by Jefferson Morley, and a friend of his. She didn't like the part where the homeless guy was screwing the woodchuck in the wood line. So he made her a clean version, but I like that part. You know, there was the option of leaving that out. And the funny thing is, Jefferson made her a Jeff, whatever you want to call him, Morley. That's what we call him. Morley had made a clean version of it without all that in it because it upset her so much because she likes animals. And then he tells me that she pulled out a Google thing, YouTube thing after that, where some girl hit a beaver in the road and came back to help it, or she saw a beaver that had been hit. She went back to help it, moved it off the road, went back, and there was a homeless guy screwing the beaver. What are the odds that Jefferson Morley would make up this horrible story? And he says it just came to him. He's like, I don't know. It just felt like somebody needed to be fucking the beaver. But the woodchuck. And, you know, maybe wherever that story really happened, beavers are just a little bit more available than woodchucks.